Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. Grace's Love Stories produces scripted, AI-generated stories that promote, entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The scent of rain-soaked earth mixed with wood smoke drifted through the gathering hall, but it couldn't mask the sharp tang of my own fear. I stood near the back wall, my wheat blonde hair pulled into a tight braid that felt like it was trying to hold me together, while around me the annual bonding ceremony unfolded with all its ancient pageantry. Candles flickered in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows across faces flushed with wine and anticipation. This was the night when wolves chose their mates, when bonds were declared before the entire pack, when futures were written in promises spoken aloud. I was 24 years old, and I had never been chosen. The hall buzzed with conversation, laughter rising and falling like waves. I watched couples move toward the center dais where Elder Rowan waited to bless their unions. Sarah, who'd grown up beside me in the pack's communal nursery, stood radiant in a blue dress as her mate-to-be kissed her hand. Even Thomas, who'd always been shy and awkward, had found someone, a quiet woman from the Eastern Territory who looked at him like he hung the moon. I pressed my back against the cold stone wall and tried to become part of it. "Still alone, Kara?" The voice came from my left, sticky sweet with false sympathy. I didn't need to look to know it was Morgana, the beta's daughter. Her dark hair elaborately curled, and her dress cut to display every advantage nature had given her. Such a shame, though I suppose it's understandable. Who would want to waste their bloodline on someone who can't even... Morgana. The warning came from Beatrice, one of the few women who'd ever shown me genuine kindness. She stepped between us, her matronly presence a shield I both needed and resented needing. "Don't you have your own bonding to attend to?" Morgana's laugh was light, careless. "Of course. Though I was just thinking how lucky some of us are. Strong bloodlines, healthy bodies, the ability to give our mates what they actually need." She swept away in a rustle of silk, leaving her words hanging in the air like poison. The diagnosis had come when I was 19. Scarring from a childhood illness that had nearly killed me, that's what the pack healer had said, her voice gentle but final. Barren. Such an old-fashioned word, but it was the one that stuck. In a society built on family lines, on the continuation of wolf blood through generations, I had become something pitiful, something incomplete. I'd learned to wear it like armor, this knowledge of my inadequacy. Better to expect nothing than to watch hope die in someone's eyes when they learned the truth. The ceremony continued. Elder Rowan's voice rose and fell, speaking of moon blessings and ancient bonds. I should leave. No one would notice my absence. They never did. I was already planning my escape route when the massive oak doors at the hall's entrance crashed open. The sound cut through the celebration like a blade. Cold wind rushed in, extinguishing half the candles. The crowd fell silent, conversations dying mid-word. Even the musicians stopped playing, their instruments hanging forgotten in their hands. I felt the shift in the air, the way every wolf in the room suddenly went still. Instincts awakening. 3 figures entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The man in the center moved like violence contained in human form. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes that caught the remaining candlelight like chips of amber ice. He wore black, simple but unmistakably expensive, and carried himself with the kind of authority that didn't need to be announced. It simply was. But it was the 2 flanking him that made my breath catch. A woman with silver-streaked hair and a scar running down her left cheek, her hand resting casually on a blade at her hip, and a younger man, perhaps early 20s, whose pretty features were offset by the cold calculation in his gaze. I didn't need to be told who they were. Every wolf in the territory knew of the Northern King. Ezra Thorne, they called him, though he'd also been known by darker names. The Alpha who'd unified the fractured northern territories through a combination of strategic brilliance and, when necessary, brutal force. The ruler whose pack was the largest and most powerful in living memory. The man who had 8 children and no mate. Elder Rowan recovered first, stepping forward with a bow that somehow managed to be respectful without being subservient. King Ezra. We weren't expecting. That is, we're honored by your presence. But the ceremony tonight is just a small pack tradition. Nothing that would require, I'm not here for the ceremony. Ezra's voice was deep, textured like smoke and stone. It carried across the silent hall without him raising it. I'm here because I received a report 3 weeks ago. An inventory of bloodlines in the Southern Territories. His eyes swept across the crowd, and I felt people shrinking back, trying to become invisible. It seems your pack has been hoarding something valuable. The silence stretched tighter. Beside me, Beatrice's hand found mine, squeezed once in warning or comfort. I couldn't tell which. I assure you, Your Majesty, we have nothing that... Elder Rowan began, but Ezra cut him off with a slight gesture. Not something. Someone. His gaze moved through the crowd systematically, and my heart began to hammer. A woman, mid-20s, blonde hair, unmated. He paused, and his next words made my blood run cold. Barren. The crowd shifted. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, finding me against the wall like hounds scenting prey. I felt Beatrice's hand tighten on mine, felt my own lungs constricting. This couldn't be happening. Why would the Northern King care about someone like me? What possible value could I have to him? Ezra's eyes found mine across the distance. Locked. Held. There you are, he said softly. But somehow everyone heard it. He began walking toward me, the crowd parting like water before him. Each step echoed in the sudden quiet. The woman with the scar and the young man followed, flanking him like shadows. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body had turned to stone. He stopped 3 feet away, this close. I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He was older than I'd first thought, perhaps early 40s, and there was something in his expression that I couldn't read. Not cruelty, not pity either. Something else entirely. What's your name? He asked. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Kara. Kara Bennett. Kara Bennett. He repeated it like he was tasting the syllables. Do you know why I'm here? I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak again. I have 8 children, he said, and the statement hung in the air between us. 4 boys, 4 girls, ages ranging from 16 down to 3. They lost their mother 6 years ago. Since then, I've been ruling a territory the size of 3 provinces, managing alliances, putting down rebellions, and trying to raise children who won't grow up to be monsters. Do you know what I don't have time for? This time I managed to speak. No. Romance. Politics. The endless parade of eligible wolves and their families trying to position themselves as the next queen. His eyes never left mine. Do you know what I need? My mind spun uselessly. This was impossible. None of this made sense. I need someone who won't see my children as obstacles to producing her own. Someone who won't view them as competition for affection or resources. Someone who will help me raise them because they're worth raising, not because it's a stepping stone to something else. He paused, and something that might have been exhaustion flickered across his face. I need someone who understands what it means to be overlooked, underestimated. Someone who won't use motherhood as a weapon or a negotiation. The hall was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I've spent 3 weeks reviewing bloodlines and pack records across 6 territories. Every woman who's been passed over, rejected, deemed not good enough for one reason or another. His voice dropped lower. Do you know how rare it is to find someone who's been hurt by the system but hasn't let it make them cruel? I felt tears burning behind my eyes, fought them back. You don't know me. No, he agreed, but I know your record. I know you volunteer at the pack nursery even though it must be painful. I know you mediated a dispute between the Jackson and Morrison families last year when their feud was threatening to turn violent. I know that when Sarah over there... He gestured without looking. Was sick during her first trimester. You brought her meals for 2 weeks straight, even though she'd been one of the ones who whispered about you behind your back. My face burned. How did he know these things? How had someone been watching me without my knowledge? I'm not offering you a love story, Ezra continued, his voice matter-of-fact. I'm offering you a purpose, a place. 8 children who need someone in their corner who isn't positioning for political advantage. A position as queen that comes with actual responsibility instead of just a crown. He studied my face, searching for something. And in return, you get out of here. Away from the whispers and the pity and the endless ceremonies where you're reminded of what you can't have. Behind him, the scarred woman shifted slightly, her expression unreadable. The young man looked bored, examining his nails. Why me? I heard myself ask. If you've reviewed so many records, why choose me specifically? Something almost like a smile touched his lips. Because when my scout spoke to people who knew you, 3 different wolves used the same word. Compassionate. He let the word sit between us. That's what my children need. Not someone trying to replace their mother. Not someone using them as pawns. Just compassion. I thought about my small room in the pack house. About the ceremony happening behind us, all those happy couples beginning their lives together. About Morgana's poisonous sympathy, and the way people's eyes slid past me as if I were already a ghost. I thought about 8 children I'd never met, growing up in a palace with a father too busy to be a father, surrounded by people who saw them as chess pieces. When? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Stronger than I expected. Tonight. He said it simply. We leave within the hour. You can bring whatever fits in 2 bags. Everything else can be replaced. That's insane, I breathed. I don't know you. I don't know your children. I don't know anything about... You're right, he interrupted. It's insane. It's also your only real option, and we both know it. Not cruel, just honest. Stay here and spend the rest of your life being everyone's cautionary tale. Or come with me and actually matter to someone. The choice was impossible. The choice was already made. I looked at Beatrice, who still held my hand. Her eyes were wet, but she nodded once. Go, she whispered. Go and don't look back. I turned to Ezra Thorne, this stranger who'd walked into my life and offered me an escape I'd never dared to imagine. I'll need 20 minutes to pack. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around him. Relief, maybe. You have 15. Adrian. The scarred woman stepped forward. Help her. Make sure she's not bothered. As Adrienne led me toward the hall's side exit, I heard the murmuring begin behind us. Shock, speculation, envy. I didn't look back. Couldn't. If I looked back, I might lose my nerve. In my small room, I moved mechanically. Clothes, a few books, the photograph of my parents. Adrienne stood by the door, silent but present, while I tried to compress my entire existence into 2 travel bags. He's not cruel, she said suddenly. In case you're wondering. Hard, yes, sometimes ruthless, but never needlessly cruel. I paused in my packing, meeting her scarred face, and the children. Something softened in her expression. Wild, brilliant, exhausting, exactly what children should be. She hesitated. They need someone who sees them, not what they represent. I nodded and continued packing, my hands steadier now. When I emerged 15 minutes later, my bags in hand, Ezra was waiting in the corridor. The young man, I still didn't know his name, took my bags without being asked. The king himself studied me for a long moment, as if making sure I wouldn't bolt. Last chance, he said quietly. Once we leave, there's no coming back. Not to this life. I thought about that. Really thought about it. About the ceremonies I wouldn't attend. The sympathetic looks I wouldn't endure. The slow fade into irrelevance I'd been facing. And I thought about 8 children who needed someone who understood what it felt like to be on the outside. I'm ready, I said. We walked through the hall, and this time I did look, at the faces watching us, at the ceremony that would continue without me, at the life I was leaving behind. Elder Rowan looked stunned. Morgana looked furious. Sarah looked confused. Beatrice stood near the entrance, and as I passed, she pulled me into a brief, fierce hug. "Be brave," she whispered. "Be exactly who you are." Then we were outside, in the rain-washed night, and 3 horses waited where Ezra's group had left them. He helped me mount, his hand steady and impersonal, before swinging onto his own horse with practiced ease. As we rode away from the only home I'd ever known, I felt something strange unfurling in my chest. Not quite hope. I wasn't that naive, but something close to it. Something that felt dangerously like possibility. The Northern King rode beside me in silence. And ahead of us, somewhere in the darkness, 8 children waited to meet the woman who couldn't give them siblings, but might, just might, give them something more important. I didn't know what I was riding toward, but I knew, with absolute certainty, what I was riding away from, and that, for now, was enough. The journey north took 3 days, and with each mile, I felt the weight of my decision settling into my bones like winter cold. We traveled hard, stopping only when the horses needed rest, or when darkness made the forest roads too dangerous to navigate. Ezra spoke little, his attention focused on the path ahead, occasionally conferring in low tones with Adrienne about routes and timing. The young man, whose name I learned was Devon, Ezra's nephew and chief strategist, rode slightly apart, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line as if expecting an attack at any moment. I was left largely to my own thoughts, which proved to be terrible company. What had I done? In the span of an hour, I'd agreed to uproot my entire existence to become stepmother to 8 children I'd never met, consort to a king who'd made it clear he wanted function over affection. The reality of it crashed over me in waves during those long hours in the saddle. I'd be responsible for raising the heirs to the most powerful pack in the Northern Territories. Me, the woman who'd been deemed too broken to mother anyone. On the second night, we stopped at a way station, a fortified inn that catered to travelers who needed more security than comfort. Adrienne showed me to a small room with a narrow bed and a single window that looked out over dark forest. "You're wondering if you made a mistake," she said, not a question. I sat on the bed, exhaustion making me honest. "I'm wondering if I'm going to fail those children before I even meet them." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Want to know what I think? Do I have a choice?" A slight smile crossed her scarred face. Ezra's first mate, Sienna. She was beautiful. Powerful bloodline, politically connected. Everything a queen should be on paper. She paused. She also saw those children as accessories. Pretty things to parade at ceremonies, but hand off to nursemaids the moment they became inconvenient. My chest tightened. That's horrible. She wasn't cruel, just absent. And when she died, the children grieved more for the idea of a mother than for who she actually was. Adrienne's eyes met mine. "You won't be that. Whatever else you might be, you won't be absent." After she left, I lay in the dark and tried to imagine 8 faces I'd never seen. What did they like? What frightened them? Did they resent me already, this stranger their father was bringing home? The questions spiraled until sleep finally claimed me. We arrived at Thornhaven Palace on the afternoon of the 4th day, and my first glimpse of it stole my breath. The structure rose from the mountainside like it had grown there, all dark stone and soaring towers, with forests spreading green and endless below. Walls that had weathered centuries enclosed courtyards and gardens, and everywhere I looked, wolves moved with purpose, guards patrolling battlements, servants hurrying between buildings, nobles in fine clothes gathered in clusters. This was power made manifest. This was where I would live. Impressive, isn't it? Devon had ridden up beside me, his earlier boredom replaced by something more proprietorial. 12 generations of Thorns have ruled from here. Try not to embarrass us too badly. Devon. Ezra's voice carried a warning. Enough. We rode through gates that closed behind us with a finality that made my pulse spike. In the main courtyard, a small crowd had gathered. I spotted household staff, several official-looking men in formal dress, and off to one side, a cluster of young people who could only be the children. My heart hammered as Ezra dismounted and came to help me down. His hands on my waist were steady, impersonal, but when I stumbled slightly on legs cramped from riding, he held me upright until I found my balance. "Steady," he murmured. They're more nervous than you are." I doubted that, but before I could respond, he was leading me forward, toward the waiting group. The crowd parted, and suddenly I was facing 8 pairs of eyes, all watching me with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to something that might have been hope. Ezra's voice carried across the courtyard. "Children, this is Kara Bennett. She's agreed to join our household and help care for all of you. I expect you to treat her with respect and give her a chance to know you." He paused. "Kara, these are my children." He introduced them left to right. Damien, 16, tall and already showing his father's build, his dark eyes assessing me with uncomfortable intensity. Celeste, 14, beautiful in that unsettling way teenagers could be, her blonde hair, lighter than mine, falling in waves past her shoulders, her expression carefully neutral. The twins came next, Finn and Freya, both 12, identical in their auburn coloring and the mischievous glint in their green eyes. Then Rowan, 10, small for his age with serious gray eyes that seemed too old for his face. Ivy, 8, with wild dark curls and dirt under her fingernails, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. The youngest were Mira, 5, who half hid behind Celeste's skirts, and little Asher, 3, who stared at me with enormous brown eyes while clutching a stuffed wolf that had seen better days. 8 children. 8 distinct personalities, already evident in how they stood, how they looked at me, how they held themselves. I was going to fail them all. "Hello," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know this is strange for all of you. It's strange for me too. I'm not here to replace anyone or change everything. I'm just here to help, if you'll let me." Silence. Then Finn, or was it Freya, whispered something to their twin that made them both snicker. Damien's expression hardened slightly. Little Mira pressed closer to Celeste. "All right," Ezra said, his tone suggesting the introduction was over. "Margaret will show Kara to her rooms. Children, dinner is in 2 hours. I expect everyone present and presentable." He turned to me. "Rest. We'll talk later about expectations and schedules." Then he was striding away, Devin and Adrienne following, and I was left with a stern-looking woman in her 60s who introduced herself as Margaret, head of household staff, and informed me that she'd been serving the Thorne family for 40 years and had very particular ideas about how things should be run. My rooms were in the family wing, 3 doors down from Ezra's own chambers. They were beautiful, a bedroom with an enormous canopied bed, a sitting room with a fireplace and walls lined with books, and a private bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in. Windows looked out over the western forest, and late afternoon sun painted everything gold. "Your things have been unpacked," Margaret said crisply. "Dinner is served in the family dining hall at 6. Don't be late. His Majesty values punctuality." She paused at the door. "And Miss Bennett? The children have been through a great deal. Whatever the king's reasons for bringing you here, I suggest you move carefully with them." Then I was alone. I stood in the center of that beautiful room and felt more out of place than I ever had standing against the wall at pack ceremonies. At least there, I'd known the rules. Here, I was playing a game I didn't understand, with stakes I couldn't comprehend. The door burst open without warning. Celeste stood in the doorway, no longer carefully neutral. Her blue eyes blazed with something that looked like fury, and when she spoke, her voice shook with restrained emotion. "Let me make something very clear," she said. "I don't know what you said to my father or what game you're playing, but we don't need you. We've been fine without a mother for 6 years, and we'll be fine after you're gone." I opened my mouth, but she wasn't finished. "Mira barely remembers our mother, and Asher doesn't remember her at all, but the rest of us do. We remember how she smiled, how she sang to us, how she made everything feel safe even when Father was away fighting. You're not her. You could never be her." Her hands clenched into fists. "So don't try. Don't pretend you care about us. Don't act like you understand. Just stay out of our way. And maybe this won't be completely unbearable." She left before I could respond, the door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my hands shaking. This was day 1. Hour 1, really. And already I could feel the hostility, the grief, the walls built high to keep out anyone who might hurt them further. What had Ezra been thinking? That children who'd lost their mother would simply accept a replacement because their father decreed it. That years of grief and abandonment could be smoothed over by bringing home a woman whose only qualification was that she couldn't compete with them for his attention. A soft knock interrupted my spiral. "Come in," I called, expecting Margaret with more rules, or perhaps Adrian with unwanted advice. Instead, Rowan slipped through the door, closing it quietly behind him. The 10-year-old studied me with those two old eyes, and I noticed he carried a book under one arm. "Celeste is scared," he said without preamble. "She yells when she's scared. Finn and Freya will test you. They test everyone. Damien won't trust you because father made him man of the house after mother died, and now you're here making him irrelevant. Ivy doesn't trust anyone except the horses. Mira's shy. Asher's too little to understand." He paused. "I thought you should know." I stared at this solemn child who just mapped out the emotional landscape of his family with surgical precision. "Thank you, Rowan. That's very helpful." "You're going to leave," he said, matter of fact. "They all do, eventually. The tutors, the governesses, the women father used to bring around before he stopped trying. You'll realize we're too much work, or not worth the effort, and you'll go." He clutched his book tighter. "It's okay. We're used to it." My heart cracked. "What if I don't leave?" "You will." He said it with the certainty of a child who'd been disappointed too many times to hope. "But maybe you could stay through Asher's birthday? It's in 6 weeks. He likes cake, and father always forgets to make it special." Then he was gone too, leaving me alone with the weight of 8 children's worth of grief and the growing certainty that I'd made a terrible mistake. Dinner that night was an exercise in controlled chaos. The family dining hall was smaller than I'd expected, designed for intimacy rather than state occasions. A long table dominated the room, and I'd been seated at Ezra's right hand, with Damien across from me and the other children spread down the length. Ezra asked about their days with the air of a man fulfilling an obligation. Damien reported on his combat training, his tone formal, addressing his father like a subordinate reporting to a commander. Celeste mentioned her music lessons, but kept glancing at me with barely concealed resentment. The twins bickered about something involving a prank and a tutor's hat, while Ivy pushed food around her plate and said nothing. Rowan read at the table until Ezra told him to put the book away. Mira spilled her milk, and the look of panic on her small face suggested she expected punishment. Little Asher fell asleep in his chair halfway through the meal, his stuffed wolf tucked under his chin. I tried to find my place in the dynamics and failed. When I asked Finn, or Freya, about their studies, they exchanged looks and gave me an answer that was technically polite, but clearly designed to shut down conversation. When I complimented Ivy's dress, she stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Only Rowan engaged, asking me questions about where I'd lived before, what books I liked, whether I knew anything about astronomy. The others watched these exchanges with varying degrees of suspicion, as if waiting for me to reveal myself as a threat. Ezra observed it all with that same unreadable expression, intervening only to correct Finn's table manners or remind Damien to include his siblings in conversation. He didn't try to smooth things over or force connection. He simply presided, a king at dinner, not a father with his family. After the meal, as servants cleared plates and children scattered to their various evening activities, Ezra finally turned to me. "Walk with me," he said. Not a request. We walked through corridors lit by lamps that cast dancing shadows, past rooms I couldn't name, and portraits of thorns I'd never know. He led me to a balcony that overlooked the western forest, where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and blood. "They hate me," I said, because there was no point in pretending otherwise. "They're afraid of you," he corrected. "There's a difference." He leaned against the balcony rail, his profile sharp against the dying light. "Celeste has been playing mother to the younger ones since Sienna died. Your presence threatens her purpose. Damien thinks I'm replacing him as protector. The twins don't trust anyone new because they've learned adults leave. Ivy." He paused. "Ivy hasn't spoken more than a dozen words to anyone outside the family in 2 years. Rowan's too smart for his own good, and has decided it's safer not to hope, and the little ones are just trying to understand why their world keeps changing." "You could have warned me," I said quietly, Would it have changed your answer? I thought about that. About the choice between being pitied in my old pack and being resented in a palace. No, probably not. They need time, Ezra said. And they need someone who won't break when they push. Because they will push, Kara. They'll test every boundary, question every motive, wait for you to prove you're like all the others who've left. He turned to look at me directly. The question is whether you have the spine to stay when it gets hard. Is that why you chose me? The words came out sharper than I intended. Because you thought I'd be too desperate to leave? Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, that I'd challenged him. I chose you because desperation can be a kind of strength, because someone who has nothing to lose sometimes has everything to give. He straightened. But I could be wrong. Time will tell. He left me there on the balcony, watching the sun sink below the trees. And I wondered if he was right. If my brokenness could somehow become the foundation for building something whole. In the distance, I heard children's laughter. Finn and Freya probably, getting into trouble. Closer, the sound of Celeste's piano drifted from an open window. A melody so achingly beautiful it made my throat tight. Somewhere in this vast palace, 8 children were going to bed thinking I was temporary. Another in a long line of people who'd tried and failed to fill the mother-shaped hole in their lives. I had 6 weeks until Asher's birthday. 6 weeks to prove Rowan wrong. 6 weeks to show them that sometimes the broken pieces fit together better than the ones that were never cracked. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't try to be their mother. I couldn't replace what they'd lost. But I could be present. I could stay. And maybe, in a house full of people who'd learned not to hope, that would be enough to start building something real. The first 2 weeks at Thornhaven Palace taught me that good intentions meant nothing against the fortress walls of hurt children. Celeste perfected the art of polite disdain. She never openly defied me, never raised her voice. That would have been unseemly for a princess. Instead, she wielded courtesy like a blade, answering my questions with perfect politeness that somehow made me feel smaller each time. When I suggested we might have tea together, she smiled and said her schedule was terribly full. When I complimented her piano playing, she thanked me with the same warmth she'd show a stranger. Damien was worse because he simply pretended I didn't exist. At meals, his eyes slid past me as if I were furniture. In the corridors, he stepped around me without acknowledgement. The one time I tried to ask about his training, he looked at his father and said, "Sir, do I need to be somewhere else?" As if my presence was an inconvenience to be tolerated. The twins made a game of it. They'd switch names on me, answer questions meant for each other, and watch with barely concealed amusement as I struggled to tell them apart. "That's Freya," Finn would say helpfully when I got it wrong, in a tone that suggested I was failing a very simple test. They weren't cruel exactly, just relentless in their determination to keep me at a distance. Ivy I rarely saw. She spent her days in the stables and her evenings in her room. Margaret mentioned that the girl had always been difficult, more comfortable with animals than people. "Don't take it personally, Miss Bennet. She's been that way since she was small." But I did take it personally. How could I not? Only Rowan and the little ones offered any respite. Rowan continued his careful observations, occasionally sharing insights that were simultaneously helpful and heartbreaking. Celeste cried last night, he mentioned one morning at breakfast, as casually as commenting on the weather. She does that sometimes. She thinks no one hears, but I do. Mira had begun watching me with cautious curiosity, though she still hid if I approached too quickly. And Asher, sweet, oblivious Asher, had started bringing me his stuffed wolf to hold during meals, which felt like more trust than all his siblings combined had offered. Ezra remained largely absent. His days were consumed with governing, councils, disputes, correspondence with other territories. When he was present at meals, he observed the dynamics without interfering, his expression unreadable. At night, I'd sometimes hear him in the corridor, checking on the children before retiring to his own chambers, but we rarely spoke beyond necessary coordination about schedules and household matters. I was lonely in a house full of people. Some nights, lying in that enormous bed, I wondered if the twins were right to test me, if Celeste was right to keep me at arm's length, if Damien's instinct to ignore me was actually wisdom. Maybe I was just another in a long line of temporary people passing through their lives. The shift began on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after my arrival. I'd spent the morning trying to organize the chaos that passed for the younger children's study schedule. Their tutors came and went, but no one seemed to coordinate lessons or ensure the children actually retained anything. Asher was supposed to be learning letters, but spent most of his time drawing wolves. Mira had clear talent for mathematics, but became anxious whenever anyone watched her work. I was in the library, surrounded by curriculum books and schedules, when Ivy appeared in the doorway. She didn't speak, just stood there in riding clothes that smelled of horse and hay, her dark curls escaping their braid. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then, without a word, she crossed to where I sat and dropped something on the table. A bird. Small, delicate, with a broken wing. "Can you fix it?" Her voice was rusty, like she didn't use it often. My heart hammered. This was a test, I realized, maybe the most important one yet. I carefully examined the bird, a young sparrow, stunned but alive, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I can try. Do you have somewhere we could keep it safe while it heals?" Something shifted in Ivy's expression. Not quite trust, but not hostility either. "The stables. There's a room." We worked in silence, Ivy showing me to a small tack room that she'd apparently converted into a refuge for injured animals. There was a rabbit with a scarred leg, a fox kit that watched us with amber eyes, even a young owl that clicked its beak irritably from a high perch. "I find them," Ivy explained, her words coming slowly, "in the forest, after hunts or storms, things that are hurt." I fashioned a splint from thin sticks and strips of cloth, my hands steadier than I expected. The sparrow fought at first, then seemed to understand we were trying to help. Ivy watched intently, occasionally handing me what I needed before I could ask. "My mother used to do this," she said suddenly. "Fix hurt things. She said it was important to be gentle with broken creatures." My throat tightened. She sounds like she was very wise. She was. Ivy settled the bird into a small box padded with hay. "Everyone says I'm too wild. That I should act more like Celeste, be proper, and learn to run a household. But Mother always said being wild was another word for being free." "Your mother was right," I said quietly. "The world needs wild things, free things." Ivy looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw her mother's grief reflected in her 8-year-old eyes. "You're not like the others he brought home." "What were they like?" "Afraid of dirt, afraid of animals, afraid of anything that wasn't perfect and polite." She stroked the sparrow's head with one gentle finger. "Are you afraid?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Every single day. But not of you. Not of anything that's real and wild and free." She nodded slowly, as if I'd passed some invisible test. "You can come back tomorrow to check on the bird." It wasn't much. It wasn't acceptance or love or even friendship yet, but it was a beginning, and I held it carefully as I walked back to the palace, afraid to examine it too closely in case it disappeared. That night, Mira appeared at my door. She didn't speak, just stood there in her nightdress, clutching a doll with missing button eyes. I'd seen her carrying it before, worn and loved and clearly precious. "Can't sleep?" I asked gently. She shook her head, then held out the doll. "Her name is Luna." Her eyes fell off. I examined the doll, understanding the request beneath the request. "I think I have some buttons that might work. Would you like to help me fix her?" We sat together in my sitting room, me stitching new button eyes while Mira watched with intense concentration. Her presence was soft, tentative, like a wild creature that might bolt at any sudden movement. "Do you have nightmares?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes." "Do you?" She nodded. "About the day Mother got sick. Everyone was crying, but they told me to be quiet and stay in my room. I didn't get to say goodbye. My hand stilled on the needle. That must have been very hard. Celeste says Mother is watching us from the stars. Rowan says that's scientifically unlikely. Finn and Freya say she's definitely a ghost haunting the West Tower." She looked up at me with enormous eyes. "What do you think?" I chose my words carefully. "I think that people we love never really leave us. They live in our memories, in the things they taught us. in the way we carry them forward. Your mother is in Celeste's music, and Ivy's gentleness with hurt creatures. She's in your kindness. I finished the last stitch and handed back the doll. That's not science or ghosts. That's just love. Mira studied Luna's new button eyes, then looked at me. Will you tell me a story? About when you were little? So I did. I told her about growing up in a pack where I never quite fit, about learning to find magic in small things when the big things felt impossible, about becoming friends with an old woman who taught me about herbs and healing, even though I couldn't heal myself. Mira fell asleep curled against my side. Luna clutched tight. When Margaret came looking for her an hour later, she paused in the doorway, something that might have been approval in her stern face. She hasn't done that since she was 3, Margaret said quietly. Sleep anywhere but her own bed. I carefully lifted Mira, who murmured but didn't wake, and Margaret guided me to the child's room. As I tucked her in, she grabbed my hand sleepily. Stay? She whispered. So I did. I sat beside her bed until her breathing deepened into true sleep, and even then, I stayed a while longer, watching this small person who'd offered me the gift of her trust. When I finally returned to my rooms, I found Rowan in the corridor. He'd clearly been waiting. Ivy told Celeste that you fixed a bird, he said. And Mira fell asleep with you. That's progress. Is it? I was exhausted, emotionally wrung out. They're the easiest ones, he said seriously. The little ones and Ivy, they want to believe. They want someone to be safe. It's the older ones who remember better, who know that people leave. I'm not leaving, Rowan. He studied me with those 2 old eyes. Everyone says that. Then Father does something that reminds them he's not a regular person, he's a king. Or they realize we're not a regular family, we're a dynasty. Or they just get tired of trying. He paused. But I hope you're different. Asher's birthday is in 3 weeks, and I already told him you'd help make it special. The weight of that trust settled over me like a mantle. Then I guess I'd better figure out how to make a 3-year-old's birthday special. He likes wolves, Rowan offered. And cake. And stories about brave things. He turned to go, then looked back. Also, Celeste practices piano between 10 and 11 every night. She thinks no one knows, but the music room door doesn't close all the way. If someone happened to be passing by and happened to listen, she might not mind, as long as they didn't make a big thing of it. Then he was gone, leaving me with breadcrumbs to follow, and children who were slowly, cautiously, beginning to crack open the doors they'd locked tight. I thought about Ezra's words on the balcony, about time and patience and whether I had the spine to stay when it got hard. It was hard. Every day was hard. Every small rejection stung. Every closed door felt like failure. Every moment of progress came wrapped in the fear that I'd somehow ruin it. But Ivy had shown me her broken creatures. Mira had fallen asleep against my side. Rowan had given me a map to Celeste's heart, and Asher brought me his wolf at every meal. That night, at 10 o'clock, I walked past the music room. The door was indeed slightly ajar, and Celeste's playing drifted through, something sad and beautiful that spoke of loss and longing. I didn't go in. I just stood in the corridor and listened. And when the music stopped, I walked away before she could know I'd been there. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in a palace full of people learning to hope again, sometimes something was everything. The breakthrough with Celeste came not through the music, but through blood. It was a month after my arrival, 2 weeks before Asher's birthday, when the accident happened. I'd been in the kitchens with Cook, planning the birthday celebration. Rowan had been right about Ezra forgetting to make such things special, and I was determined this year would be different. We were discussing cake flavors when a servant burst in, face pale. Miss Bennett, it's Princess Celeste. There's been an incident in the practice yard. My heart stopped. I ran, not caring about decorum or the fact that I had no official authority here. The practice yard was chaos when I arrived. Guards clustered around something on the ground, Damien shouting orders, and through the crowd, I caught a glimpse of blonde hair matted with red. Celeste sat on the ground, one hand pressed to her temple, blood seeping between her fingers. Her face was white with shock. Beside her, a training sword lay in the dirt, and a young guard looked like he wanted to disappear into the earth itself. It was an accident, Damien was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Garrett was demonstrating defensive techniques. The sword slipped. I pushed through the crowd and dropped to my knees beside Celeste. Her eyes met mine, dazed and afraid. And in that moment, she wasn't a 14-year-old princess trying to be strong. She was just a child who was hurt and scared. "Let me see," I said softly, gently moving her hand away from the wound. The cut ran along her hairline, bleeding freely the way head wounds did, but it didn't look deep. Still, I'd seen enough injuries in my old pack to know that even shallow cuts could be serious if they weren't cleaned properly. "We need to get her inside," I said firmly. "Damien, have someone fetch the healer, and someone bring clean water and bandages to her room." "I can walk," Celeste protested, trying to stand. Her legs buckled. Without thinking, I caught her, one arm supporting her weight. "I know you can, but you don't have to." I looked at Damien, who stood frozen with fear for his sister written across his face. "Help me get her inside." For the first time since I'd arrived, Damien looked at me, really looked at me, and nodded. Together, we guided Celeste into the palace and up to her rooms, where I immediately set about cleaning the wound while we waited for the healer. "It stings," Celeste said, her voice small. "I know. I'm sorry." I worked as gently as I could, relieved to see the bleeding was already slowing. "You're being very brave." "I'm not brave. I'm stupid. I shouldn't have been in the practice yard at all. Father says it's not appropriate for..." She winced as I applied pressure with a clean cloth. "Your father is overprotective," I said without thinking. Then, realizing I'd just criticized the king to his daughter, I added, "Which makes sense. He's already lost too much. He doesn't want to risk losing any of you." Celeste was quiet for a moment. Mother used to say that too, that he wrapped us up too tight because he was afraid. Her eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with physical pain. I miss her. I miss her every single day, and it never gets better. And everyone says it will, but they're lying. My own eyes burned. They're not lying. It does get better. But better doesn't mean it stops hurting. It just means you learn to carry the hurt differently. "How would you know?" The question wasn't hostile, just desperate. "You still have parents. You haven't lost anyone." I finished bandaging the wound before answering. "My parents died when I was 12. Hunting accident. And I lost the future I thought I'd have when I found out I couldn't have children." I met her eyes. "Loss isn't a competition, Celeste. Your pain isn't less real because mine exists, and mine isn't less real because yours is different. We're all just doing our best with hearts that have holes in them." She stared at me, and something cracked in her carefully constructed armor. "I've been horrible to you. You've been protecting yourself. That's different." "No, I have. I've been cold and rude, and I told the others not to trust you because you'd leave anyway." The tears spilled over, "And you still ran to help me. You didn't have to. No one would have blamed you if you'd let the healer handle it." I brushed a strand of blood-matted hair from her face. "Celeste, I'm not here because I have to be. I'm here because I want to be, and that includes the hard parts and the scary parts and the parts where I get covered in blood." She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Your dress is ruined. Dresses can be cleaned. You're okay. That's what matters." The healer arrived then, an efficient woman named Helena, who examined Celeste, pronounced my field treatment adequate, and applied a proper dressing. Ezra appeared shortly after, his usual composure shattered by fear. He pulled Celeste into a hug that made her wince, his hand shaking slightly as he touched her face. "I'm fine, Father," Celeste said, but she clung to him anyway. "You're not training in that yard again," Ezra said, his voice rough. "It's too dangerous. You could have been..." "It was an accident," Celeste interrupted, "and Kara took care of me. She knew exactly what to do." Ezra's eyes found mine over Celeste's head. Something passed between us, acknowledgement, maybe, gratitude. Or perhaps just the shared understanding of people who both cared about this girl and her bleeding head. "Thank you," he said simply. After Helena left, and Ezra returned to whatever crisis he'd been handling, I stayed with Celeste. She'd grown quiet, exhausted from shock and emotion. But when I moved to leave, her hand caught mine. "Will you tell me about them? Your parents?" So I did. I told her about my mother's laugh and my father's terrible jokes, about how they'd died doing something they loved and how that was supposed to make it easier but didn't. About the years after, living with an aunt who'd done her duty but never really wanted me. "Is that why you came here?" Celeste asked. "Because you had nowhere else to go?" "Partly," I admitted, "but also because your father offered me something I'd never had before. Purpose, the chance to matter to someone. You matter to Ivy, and Mira adores you. Even Rowan likes you, though he'd never say it out loud." She paused. "And I think maybe I was wrong about you leaving. I'm not leaving, Celeste. Not unless you all decide you truly don't want me here. And even then, I'd probably put up a fight." She smiled, small but real. "Good. Because someone needs to keep Father from forgetting birthdays and letting the twins run completely wild, and..." She took a shaky breath. "And maybe I don't want to be the only one trying to hold everyone together anymore." My throat tightened. "You shouldn't have to be. You're 14. You should get to just be 14. "I don't remember how," she whispered. "Then we'll figure it out together." That evening, as word of the accident spread through the palace, something shifted in the family dynamics. Damien sought me out before dinner, his expression uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology," he said stiffly. "I've been unwelcoming. That was wrong. You were protecting your family, I understand that. Still." He met my eyes, and I saw his father's intensity reflected there. "Celeste could have been seriously hurt. You didn't hesitate. That means something." It wasn't warmth exactly, but it was acknowledgement, a beginning. The twins were less subtle. They cornered me in the corridor after dinner, both talking at once. "That was actually pretty impressive, the way you just took charge and didn't even flinch at all the blood. Plus, you made Celeste laugh, and she never laughs anymore. So we've decided you can stay." I looked between them, still struggling to tell them apart reliably. "I'm honored by your approval," Finn, or Freya, grinned. "Also, we might have put a frog in Garrett's boots. You know, for being careless with our sister." "I didn't hear that," I said firmly, fighting a smile. "Obviously not," the other twin agreed, "because that would be completely inappropriate behavior for a prince and princess." They skipped off, already plotting their next mischief, and I felt something warm settle in my chest. Not quite belonging yet, but close to it. That night, I found Ezra on the same balcony where we'd talked weeks ago. He stood with his back to me, shoulders tense, staring out at the dark forest. "She's fine," I said quietly. "Helena checked on her an hour ago. No signs of concussion, just a headache." "I should have been there." His voice was rough. "I should have been in that practice yard, not locked in some pointless council meeting arguing about trade routes. You can't be everywhere, Ezra." He turned to face me, and in the lamplight, I saw the exhaustion carved into his features. "I'm their father. That should mean something. That should mean I can keep them safe. It does mean something. It means they have someone who loves them enough to be terrified when they're hurt." I moved to stand beside him at the railing. "But you can't protect them from everything. Accidents happen. Life happens. All you can do is make sure they know they're loved and that someone will be there to help pick up the pieces when things fall apart." "Is that what you did today? Picked up pieces?" "I did what anyone would do." "No." He shook his head. "Most people would have called for the healer and stepped back. You ran toward the blood and the fear. You held her together when she was falling apart." He paused. "Celeste told me what you said, about carrying hurt differently, about loss not being a competition. She needed to hear it. She needed someone who understood." His eyes found mine. "I chose well, bringing you here. Even if I chose for the wrong reasons." "What were the wrong reasons?" "I thought I needed someone practical. Someone who wouldn't complicate things with emotions or expectations. Someone who would be safe." A slight smile touched his lips. I didn't account for the fact that you'd actually care about them, that you'd run into danger for them, that you'd make yourself vulnerable to protect them from their own vulnerability. My heart hammered. Is that a problem? No, he said softly. It's just unexpected. And he hesitated. And for the first time since I'd met him, Ezra Thorne looked uncertain. And it makes what I'm about to ask much more complicated. What are you about to ask? He turned to face me fully, his expression serious. I've received word that the Southern Council is demanding I present my heir and consort at their summit in 3 weeks. It's tradition. A new consort must be formally introduced to the Allied territories. There will be ceremonies, formal dinners, political maneuvering. He paused. It means we need to present as a united front, as a king and his chosen queen, not just in name, but in appearance. Understanding dawned slowly. You want us to pretend we're actually together, not just a political arrangement. I want us to be convincing enough that no one questions your position here or tries to undermine your authority with the children. His jaw tightened. There are people who would use any perceived weakness against us, against them. If the council thinks you're just a temporary convenience, they'll treat you, and by extension my children, as irrelevant. And if they think I'm truly your queen, then you become untouchable. Your word carries weight. Your protection of the children is backed by royal authority. He studied my face. I know I'm asking a lot. I know this wasn't part of our original agreement. But after today, after seeing how they're beginning to trust you, I need you to have the power to protect them when I can't be there. I thought about Celeste's blood on my hands, about Ivy's broken creatures and Mira's nightmares and Rowan's careful observations, about 8 children who'd begun to crack open their doors just enough to let me glimpse the scared, hopeful people inside. What would this look like? This united front? Nothing you'd be uncomfortable with, he said quickly. But we'd need to appear close, affectionate even, enough to convince people that this is real. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd come here expecting nothing, promised nothing. And now he was asking me to pretend to have everything while still having nothing. But it wasn't really about us, was it? It was about giving those children the stability they needed, the protection they deserved. All right, I said. I'll do it. For them. Something flickered in his expression. Relief, certainly, but something else too. Something I couldn't quite name. Thank you, Kara. He said my name like it meant something. And I felt the ground shift beneath my feet in ways I didn't want to examine. 3 weeks until Asher's birthday. 3 weeks until the Southern Council Summit. 3 weeks to convince the world that a broken woman and a widowed king had somehow built something real. It should have felt impossible. Instead, standing on that balcony with Ezra Thorne beside me and 8 children sleeping safely inside, it felt almost like hope. Asher's birthday arrived with early morning sunshine and the kind of chaos that only small children could create. I'd spent weeks planning, with secret help from Rowan and increasingly enthusiastic input from the others. The great hall had been transformed. Banners painted with wolves hung from the rafters. Tables groaned under the weight of food, and in the center of it all sat a cake shaped like a wolf's head that had taken Cook and me 3 attempts to get right. Asher's eyes went wide when he saw it all. He clutched his stuffed wolf, now cleaned and mended, one ear carefully re-stitched, and looked up at me with such pure joy that my heart ached. For me? He whispered, as if afraid speaking louder might make it disappear. All for you, I confirmed, kneeling to his level. Because you're 3 years old today, and that's very important. He launched himself at me, small arms wrapping around my neck with the unself-conscious affection only toddlers possessed. Over his shoulder, I saw Ezra watching from the doorway, something soft in his expression that I'd never seen before. The party was beautiful chaos. The twins organized games that somehow always ended in laughter and mild destruction. Ivy brought Asher to the stables to meet a new foal, and his delighted squeals echoed across the courtyard. Mira helped him open presents, her shyness forgotten in the excitement. Even Damien unbent enough to let his baby brother climb on his back for a ride around the hall. But it was Celeste who surprised me most. She'd spent the morning playing piano, not the sad, lonely pieces she practiced at night, but bright, happy melodies that made Asher dance. And when it came time to cut the cake, she pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for remembering. For making today special when everyone else would have let it pass with just a regular dinner and maybe a new toy." "He deserves special," I said simply. "So do we." She squeezed my hand. "And you're giving that to us, all of us, even when we don't make it easy." That evening, after Asher had been put to bed clutching a new stuffed wolf to go with his old one, and the other children had scattered to their rooms exhausted and happy, Ezra found me in the great hall. I was helping servants clear the last of the decorations, unable to let go of the day quite yet. "Leave it," he said. "They can finish tomorrow." "I don't mind." "Kara," he stepped closer, and I noticed he'd shed his usual formal attire for something simpler. He looked younger somehow, less like a king, and more like just a man. "Walk with me, please." We walked through the palace gardens as dusk fell, the air sweet with night-blooming flowers. For a while, neither of us spoke. We'd grown comfortable with silence over the past weeks, an unexpected development given how our arrangement had started. "I watched you today," Ezra said finally, "with Asher, with all of them. The way Ivy actually laughed, the way Damien relaxed enough to play, the way Celeste looked at you like you were someone she could trust." He paused beside a fountain, its water catching the last light. "You've done what I couldn't. You've given them permission to be children again. They were always children. They just forgot for a while, because I made them forget." His voice carried old pain. "After Sienna died, I buried myself in ruling. I told myself I was securing their futures, building them a stronger kingdom, but really I was just running from the grief. And they paid the price." I'd never heard him speak this openly before. "You did the best you could, did I?" He turned to face me fully. "Or did I use duty as an excuse to avoid feeling anything? It was easier to be the king than to be their father. Easier to make strategic decisions than to sit with their pain and my own. And now? Now I see what they need, what I've been denying them." He hesitated, and I saw the uncertainty again, that crack in his armor. "The summit is tomorrow. We leave at dawn. Are you ready for this?" The Southern Council Summit. 3 days of ceremonies and politics, and pretending to be something we weren't. "As ready as I'll ever be. There's something you should know." He moved closer, close enough that I could see the amber flecks in his eyes, the silver threading through his hair. "When we're there, we'll need to appear as though this is real. As though we chose each other out of love, not convenience." "I know." "You explained." I didn't finish. His hand came up, hovering near my face but not quite touching. "What I'm trying to say is that it won't be entirely acting, not for me. Not anymore." The world seemed to stop. "What are you saying, Ezra?" "I'm saying that somewhere between watching you fix a bird with Ivy and holding Celeste together after her accident, between listening to you tell Mira stories and seeing you make my youngest son feel like he mattered, I stopped seeing you as a solution to a problem." His voice dropped lower. "I started seeing you as someone I wanted, someone I needed. Not for the children, though they need you too, but for myself." My heart hammered against my ribs. "You hired me to be practical, to not complicate things. I know what I hired you for." A slight smile touched his lips. "Turns out I'm not as immune to complications as I thought. And you, Kara Bennett, are the most beautiful complication I've ever encountered." "I can't give you children," I said, the old wound opening. "I can't give you heirs or expand your bloodline or—" "I have 8 children," he interrupted gently. "I don't need more. What I need, what I want, is someone who sees them as people, not pawns. Someone who understands that strength isn't just about power and control. Someone who runs toward blood and fear instead of away from it." He finally touched me, his fingers brushing my cheek with devastating gentleness. "I want you. Not despite your scars, but including them. Because they made you who you are. And who you are is extraordinary." Tears burned behind my eyes. "This is insane. 2 months ago, I was standing against a wall at a bonding ceremony, invisible and irrelevant. Now you're saying, I'm saying that I want this to be real. Not just for the summit, not just for appearances. Real. His thumb traced my cheekbone. But only if you want it too. I won't force this. If you'd rather keep things as they are, I'll respect that, but I needed you to know that what I feel isn't pretend. I thought about the past 2 months, about how I'd arrived expecting nothing, and had somehow found everything. About 8 children who'd cracked open their doors and let me in. About this man who'd seemed so cold and distant, but was really just someone who'd forgotten how to feel until life forced him to remember. I'm terrified, I whispered. Of me? Of this. Of caring about all of you, and then losing it somehow. Of finally having something real, and discovering I'm not strong enough to keep it. Ezra's other hand came up, cradling my face between his palms. Kara, you're the strongest person I know. You walked into a house full of hostile children and a king who thought he could treat people like chess pieces, and you refused to be anything other than exactly who you are. You didn't try to force love or demand acceptance. You just stayed. And kept staying, even when it was hard. His forehead touched mine. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. What if I fail? What if I can't be what they need, what you need? Then we'll fail together, and we'll get up and try again. That's what families do, real families. Not the perfect ones in stories. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm offering you a complicated, messy, beautiful reality with 8 children who need you and a king who's slowly remembering how to be human again. It won't always be easy, but I hope, it might be worth it. The walls I'd built around my heart for so many years crumbled like paper. It's already worth it. Is that a yes? Instead of answering with words, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. He responded with gentle intensity, his hands steady in my hair, and I felt something fundamental shift in the universe. This wasn't pretend. This wasn't for show. This was real in a way that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ezra rested his forehead against mine again. We should probably discuss logistics, sleeping arrangements, public appearances, how to tell the children. Tomorrow, I interrupted. Tonight, can we just be? Yes, he said simply. We can absolutely just be. We stayed in the garden until stars filled the sky, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about Sienna, not with the grief of loss, but with the fondness of memory, about how she'd been a good queen, but a distant mother, more interested in position than people. How he'd loved her, but never quite connected with her. I told him about my years of invisibility, about learning to find value in being overlooked, about the aunt who'd housed me but never loved me, about arriving at Thornhaven expecting nothing, and finding a home I never knew I wanted. We're quite a pair, Ezra said eventually, a smile in his voice. The king who forgot how to feel, and the woman who learned to live without hope, and 8 children who needed us both to remember how to be human. When did you become so wise? Probably around the same time you became so honest. I leaned into him, letting myself take comfort in his solid presence. What happens at the summit? We show them that you're not just my consort. You're my queen, my partner. And anyone who tries to undermine that will discover exactly how protective I can be. His arm tightened around me, but mostly we just be ourselves, together, and trust that's enough. The next 3 days at the Southern Council Summit were a whirlwind of politics, ceremonies, and carefully orchestrated appearances. I wore dresses I'd never dreamed of owning, and stood beside Ezra as he negotiated treaties and alliances. The other territorial leaders watched us with calculating eyes, looking for weaknesses to exploit. They didn't find any, because somewhere between the formal dinners and the political maneuvering, something remarkable happened. Ezra and I stopped acting and simply were. His hand on my back felt natural, not staged. The way he looked at me when I spoke carried genuine interest, not performance. And when the Duchess of Westmarch made a snide comment about my convenient infertility, Ezra's response was swift and devastating. My consort's worth isn't measured by her ability to produce heirs, he said. his voice carrying across the council chamber with quiet fury. It's measured by her compassion, her courage, and her capacity to see people, including my children, as individuals deserving of respect and love. If you find that threatening, perhaps you should examine your own values. The Duchess never spoke to me again. Others, however, began seeking my counsel, asking about the children, treating me not as an ornament, but as someone with actual influence. On the final night, at the grand banquet, Ezra pulled me onto the dance floor. As we moved together, he leaned close and whispered, "Have I mentioned that you're magnificent?" Not in the last hour. Unforgivable oversight. His eyes held warmth and humor, and something deeper that made my breath catch. "You're magnificent, and I'm incredibly lucky that you said yes to a stranger who crashed your bonding ceremony with an impossible offer. Best decision I ever made," I admitted. Even with all the chaos, the hostile children, the political intrigue, the king who doesn't know how to separate duty from feeling. Especially with all that, I smiled up at him. Turns out I like complications. When they're the right kind. We returned to Thornhaven to find the children had thrown together a welcome home celebration that was more enthusiasm than execution. The banners were crooked, the cake was lopsided, and someone, definitely the twins, had put confetti in places confetti should never go. It was perfect. Asher ran to us immediately, demanding to be picked up and told everything about the summit. Mira showed me a drawing she'd made. Our family, she called it, with stick figures representing all of us, including me. Ivy reported that the sparrow's wing had healed, and she'd released it that morning. Rowan informed us that he'd kept detailed notes of everything that happened while we were gone, in case we needed a comprehensive report. Celeste hung back slightly, but when I caught her eye, she smiled, genuine and warm, and mouthed, "Thank you." Even Damien seemed different, less guarded. When he approached Ezra to report on the household status in our absence, he included me in the conversation without prompting, asking my opinion on a dispute between servants like my input mattered. Because it did matter now. I wasn't just the woman their father had brought home. I was family. That night, after the children were finally in bed, and the palace had settled into quiet, Ezra found me in my sitting room. I was curled up with a book, still wearing the simple dress I'd changed into, my hair loose around my shoulders. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the seat beside me. "It's your palace. It's your room." He sat anyway, close enough that our shoulders touched. "I've been thinking. Dangerous activity for a king," he smiled. "I've been thinking that we should make this official. Not just for politics or appearances, but because I want to wake up every morning knowing you're not going anywhere. That you're here by choice, not obligation." My heart stuttered. "Ezra, marry me," he said simply. "Not because it makes sense politically, or because the children need a mother figure. Marry me because I love you, because you've made this house a home again. Because I can't imagine facing tomorrow without knowing you'll be beside me." I set down my book with shaking hands. "You love me?" Desperately, completely, and probably far sooner than I should have. He took my hands in his. "I love the way you see the world, the way you never gave up on my children even when they gave you every reason to. The way you're brave enough to be vulnerable and strong enough to be gentle. I love you, Kara. All of you. Including the parts you thought were broken." Tears spilled over, but for once, they were happy tears. "I love you too. I think I started loving you the moment you said compassion like it was something valuable instead of a weakness. Is that a yes?" "That's absolutely a yes." He kissed me then, soft and deep and full of promise. And when we finally pulled apart, both smiling like fools, he produced a ring. Simple silver with a small blue stone that caught the lamplight. "It was my grandmother's," he said, sliding it onto my finger. "She always said it should go to someone who knew how to love without conditions. I think she'd approve of you." The ring fit perfectly. 6 months later, we were married in the palace gardens with 8 children as our wedding party. Asher dropped the rings twice. The twins accidentally released doves at the wrong moment. Ivy's rescued fox escaped and caused brief chaos. Mira cried happy tears. Rowan gave a speech that was somehow both touching and slightly too analytical. Damien stood beside his father with pride in his eyes. And Celeste played the piano as I walked down the aisle, Something joyful this time, full of hope and new beginnings. It wasn't perfect. It was better than perfect. It was real. As Ezra and I exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever came next, I thought about the woman I'd been just months ago. Standing against a wall, invisible and irrelevant, convinced her broken pieces meant she had nothing to offer, I thought about how wrong I'd been. Because those broken pieces, mine and Ezra's and the children's, had come together to create something whole, not despite the cracks, but because of them. The light got in through the broken places, and somehow, impossibly, we'd built something beautiful from the fragments. That night, as the celebration continued and our family, our real, complicated, perfect family, danced and laughed and made new memories, Ezra pulled me close. No regrets? He whispered against my hair. I looked around at 8 children who called me mother now, at a man who loved me completely, at a home I'd never expected to find. Not a single one, I said. Not one. And I meant it with every scarred, healed, whole piece of my heart.